ever wonder where your old cell phone from, say, 2006 is now? How about the rollerblades you used to own in the 90s, or those platform shoes from decades earlier? Now, the sad reality is, unless you know a product you're buying is biodegradable or recyclable, it's probably ending up at a place you don't want to know about or think about. And the fact is, there are thousands of such products for all of us. Thankfully, there are some enterprising entrepreneurs thinking about solutions to problems we don't even think about. Take the roof of your house, for example. Did you know there are more than 13 million tons of asphalt shingles ripped from homes every year? Only 10% don't end up in landfills. Aidan thinks about this all the time. He's the CEO of Northstar Clean Technologies, a recently listed company that's aiming to solve the aforementioned problem of turning your old roof into commercially viable products and keeping it out of landfills. Cantech letter recently caught up with Mr. Mills to talk about how the company got started and what's next. And we're pleased to be joined now by Aidan Mills, the CEO of Northstar Clean Technologies. Thanks for being here, Aidan.
Great to see you, Richard. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Aidan, can you tell us how Northstar Cleantech came to be?
So Northstar started, the technical idea started in Lafarge. So Lafarge, a bit like as we talk about the market and how big it is, we're kind of looking at all the asphalt shingles that were going into landfill, realizing that a quarter of that was oil, and so their paving division was saying, look, is there anything we can do with this? So they started to look at the technology and look at various ideas. They brought it into their executive, and at that point in time, there wasn't enough capital, and not the capital appetite either, to do some development work in Lafarge. But a couple of the people that were helping them out, the contractors that were helping them out in that kind of like investigative process, had formed Empower Environmental Services a few years earlier and said, listen, can we take this idea? And so Lafarge were like, yeah, okay, so here's the clearance, take the idea. And then, and so it kind of in exchange for an offtake agreement. So the agreement was if Empower Environmental Services developed these plants, that the first 3 plants in Western Canada, then there would be, Lafarge would have the offtake, which is great because we have an offtaker for our plants. So then, the Empower guys took the idea. They did some testing in a facility here in Alberta. Then they purchased a plant in Delta out in BC and built essentially like the pilot plant. But just to be clear, this pilot plant can do, when fully commissioned, kind of 50 to 100 tons a day, and it's in a warehouse, so it's not like sitting on a bench. It's literally a full pilot plant. Northstar then were the financing vehicle, some BC financiers. They came in, amalgamated with Empower at the end of last year, and then Northstar itself did the IPO in the middle of the year to generate the financing to be able to drive the business forward.
Yeah, interesting. Just how large, Aidan, is the market right now?
So it's spectacular. So let me when I'm doing some of these things, it's always good to kind of describe what an asphalt shingle tile really is, and so what the market is for it. So an asphalt shingle tile is about 50% aggregate or sand, about 25% fiber. The old tiles, the fiber is paper. The new tiles, the fiber is fiberglass, and 25% oil. So the market we have is really for these 4 different products. So we've got a market for sand, we've got a market for asphalt, we've got a market for paper fiber, and we have a market for fiberglass fiber. So just to tell you though, and think about the feedstock of how much the size of the market from feedstock perspective. So in the US, 84% of all single family homes, all new roofs, are asphalt shingles. That's the number that goes on roofs every year. And that's because they're light, they're long lasting, they're cheaper than the alternatives. Are there other alternatives? For sure. Could there be more eco-friendly alternatives that come in the future? For sure. But this year, 84% of all new houses in the US have asphalt shingles. So what happens with that is that creates, when people are re-roofing or there's demolition going on, etc., that creates a market of 13 million tons a year that come off roofs in the US. Okay, so what does that really mean in kind of real figures? About 1 million of it is ground up and put into roads. So if you Google recycled asphalt shingle, you'll find there's companies everywhere, and those are the guys that are taking the tiles and grinding them up, putting them into the road. So they're not doing any separation. So the ground up tile in the road still has the sand and the asphalt and the fiber. 12 million tons goes to landfill. So 13 million comes off and 12 million goes to landfill. And so people are like, well, is that a lot? Like, how does that work? So 12 million tons goes to landfill. 25% of a tile is oil. So that's 3 million tons of oil. How much is 3 million tons of oil? Over 18 million barrels. So that, in terms of the size of the problem, is the same as 1 day of US production. So it's a bit like in the 1st of January, the US produces over 18 million barrels of oil and pours it straight into landfill. That's the size of the market.
Wow. So how are the shingles being repurposed? Do they become Aidan new shingles, or do they become other products?
Well, the good thing is our process, out the back of our process comes sales quality asphalt, sales quality aggregate or sand, and sales quality fiber. So they can go back into any of the industrial products that use asphalt, fiber, or sand. Look, fiber and sand are kind of local market things. Like there's no sand manufacturer that cares that this is a kind of recycling or repurposing or circular economy product. But the asphalt is really important because it can either go back into roads or it can go back into shingles. So generally, it would be blended with some of the other asphalt, virgin asphalt, and could go back into shingles, but it is totally circular. And the way our process works is we don't take asphalt shingles in and then like have some concentrated goo that has to go back to landfill. We are a 100% diversion away from landfill.
So how do you scale the business? Like specifically, how do you recover asphalt en masse?
So the plan that we have is, so we've got an engineering process that's going on now to design the new modular design facility. Our facility in Delta that we did the commissioning runs in, look, at full debottleneck, that might be 50 to 100 tons a day. It's an entrepreneured plant, I describe it as, not like an engineered plant. The engineered plant, we think, will probably be in the 150 to 200 tons a day range, and that's the single shift. So if we double the shifts, we could potentially increase it if we move to 24/7. Depends on the market. So the thing about asphalt shingles is, what you really want to do is you want to deploy those plants all across North America, and that's the strategy. So if a city has more than 1 million people, we can literally, that will generate enough asphalt shingles going to landfill that we can literally put one of our plants. When we get to somewhere like Toronto, which has 4 times the size of the number of people of Calgary, we're not going to build a plant that is 4 times the size. We literally will build 4 plants, north, south, east, and west, or 2 plants in one location. And if you look at somewhere like LA that's got 10 million people, so 10 times the size of Calgary, we could put 10 plants. So the plan is never to just massively upscale the technology. The plan is to build exactly the same facility, just in lots of different places. So that's the scale up.
Really, really interesting. I know you were brought in here after an extensive search, Aidan. How does your background help you lead in this space?
Well, I mean, if you look at what Northstar needs, so Northstar needs engineering support. Northstar needs, we have asphalt coming out the back end, so commodity negotiations and understanding commodity supply is important, and it needs strategy for rolling out. So look, I've got 30 years in the industry, mostly in the hydrocarbon space. I worked for BP for nearly 20 years. The first 10 years was engineering and operations. So I was a control engineer for BP. The second stint, second part of the career, I moved on to the commercial side. I was in marketing and trading, did origination for a number of the trading businesses, was head of origination for the BP oil trading business in Chicago, so covering North and South America. So lots of capability in terms of engagement around contracts. And so when we're talking as a startup to people like a Lafarge, like a Colas, I've sat on the other side of the table and thinking about strategically what those businesses are looking for as well. And then the last thing, so I worked for Goldman Sachs and here in Canada, worked for both Husky and Meg, and those were strategic jobs, kind of looking at, well, how are we developing our markets, how are we developing our offtakes, etc. So that's, I mean, my background supports those, but it's important to talk about the team as well. So the team's really split into three, and so the leadership team are with a broad skill set. So the first part of that, which is absolutely essential, is the leadership team includes the entrepreneurs that came up with the idea and know the technology inside and out and have been on the path from the very beginning all the way through to here. It also includes some of the finance people who help raise the money. So, we've got lots of retail equity. That's all our funding is essentially from the retail equity side. A lot like your, kind of your audience. And so lots of retail equity in it, but it's important to have the finance capability in that to understand how those markets work and how to work with our investors in the retail space. And then lastly is, myself joining and, the leadership team that we're going to build out here, which is all about how do we execute the plan going forward, whether it's kind of from an operations perspective, from an HSE perspective, from a finance perspective, et cetera. We will build out the team that can literally drive this business as we roll it out across North America.
Aidan, you recently engaged Wellington DuPont Public Affairs to help lead government engagement in the reduction of single-use asphalt. Do you think you can help various levels of government? Can it be a leader in this space?
Look, for sure. If you step back and you look at the highest level and you think about the federal governments, both in Canada and the US. I mean, the plan the Trudeau has, the Biden plan has got two principal tenets. One is infrastructure, and the second is green infrastructure. Look, we will build plants that will employ, each plant, is kind of, 10 or plus people. So each plant will bring jobs, to the regions, but each plant is also, it's circular. So from a municipal perspective, we will go to the municipalities with an outline that basically says, you can switch 100% of all the asphalt shingles you're sending to your landfills to our plants. And the most important thing about that is, if you look at the municipal kind of strategies, one of the things, the Clean Cities program, they want to reduce landfill as much as they possibly can, and they're looking for ways to divert as much as they possibly can. As I said earlier, we don't produce something like the back end that then gives them an intensive, hydrocarbon product to send back to the landfill. We take 100% into our plant and deal with it. So they have the ability, municipalities, to switch. So, Wellington DuPont have been great, and we've started the engagement at the federal level, engagement at the provincial level, Alberta and Ontario with respect to, the first set of plants in Canada, and engagement at the municipal level to say, look, we come in with a huge environment, a huge solution to an environmental problem, and those discussions have started. They're going really well, and that will talk to some of the non-dilutive funding that we expect to add to the balance sheet.
So I'm curious to know what your balance sheet looks like. Are you going to need to raise more capital to make this plan come to fruition?
Well, look, I think once we get the engineering done for the new plants to roll out, in the middle of next year, we will essentially, we intend, or we're thinking about starting a 6-plant process. So that will be 2 plants in the US, Pacific Northwest, 2 plants in the GTA, so over by you in Toronto, and a couple of plants in Alberta. And that will need $60 million. However, in our current balance sheet today, $10 million at the end of the last quarter, there is no government funding, there's no government support. So back to, do I think there's potential? I mean, of course, it's right down the structure, as we said, from both a federal, a municipal, and a provincial perspective, and a state perspective in the US. So we think of that 60 million, we believe that there'll be a chunk of government support in there and debt. So our balance sheet today has like $750,000 of debt in it, which is kind of revolver type debt. But in terms of structured debt, structured green debt, we think there's a huge opportunity to have non-dilutive funding in it. Might we need to raise some more equity? I mean, possibly, but we really need to understand what the non-dilutive funding from the government perspective and the debt perspective looks like, and then we can determine what the equity would need to be.
So what do you hope to accomplish then in the next 4 quarters?
Well, look, this quarter, we'll be coming out with the indicative analysis on CO2. So we believe versus virgin production that we have a lower carbon intensity. So we need to, it's great for the CEO to say that, but we need the study to actually say, okay, here's the measurement, this is what it looks like. Second thing is the engineering. So we've kicked off the engineering study. We'll be releasing who we are doing that with in a couple of weeks here. And the engineering needs to kick off for the detailed design. That finishes at the end of 1Q. And also we take the Delta plant out in Vancouver. We step that up to steady state design and likely up to full commercial production, I think, in second quarter. But certainly we'll be able to demonstrate this technology works. Here's the steady state design, and here's the debottlenecking that we're doing. Firstly for Delta, and then for the bigger plants. And the first expansion plant, or the scale up plant in Calgary, likely to start start development and start construction in Q3. And we're hoping to get that done within 6 months. So hopefully 2022 should see the first Northstar scale-up plant operating in Canada.
Super interesting field, super interesting company. Aidan Mills, CEO, Northstar Clean Technologies. Thanks for talking today. Appreciate it.
Richard, thanks very much. Great. Thanks for the time.